I'm Lori Oram. I'm the principal of Edison Language Academy, which is a pre-K through 5th grade 90-10 dual immersion school in Santa Monica, California. And you asked me to tell you a little bit about the dual language model. We use the 90-10 model of dual language instruction. Sometimes people call it two-way bilingual education, sometimes dual language or dual immersion. Those all refer to the same kind of program. These are programs where kids learn for an extended period of time in two languages. They're not early exit, they're not deficit model programs, they're an enrichment model. They're programs where kids learn together, so they're not separated by language for different groups of, or classes. And they're programs where you make long-term use and develop communicative competence in both languages, not just the minimal kind of competency you need to score at an exit exam on English. So we've been here for 34 years now as a two-way immersion program or dual language program. We make sure that everybody understands the basics of dual immersion before they put their children here, because it's a very different kind of program. And as a parent, you need to understand that we teach everybody to read here first in Spanish. Everybody learns to read first in Spanish. It takes advantage of the fact that Spanish is a relatively phonetic language, so the decoding or onboarding process for reading happens pretty quickly. You have 5 vowel sounds in Spanish and something like 23 in English. So just for decoding, it's a quicker process, and it makes sure everybody has access to literacy skills. We build Spanish literacy 90% of the day in TK, kinder, and 1st grade. Our children don't start reading in English until 2nd grade, when they've already got a good foundation of literacy awareness and literacy skills established in Spanish. And it's based on research that shows that the stronger your language skills are for language minority kids, the stronger your language skills are in your home language, the more you can use those and apply them to your second language. So it might be a little counterintuitive. It works differently for language minority kids than it does for English majority kids. And it's largely because if you're an English speaker, you are in no danger of losing your English language in the United States if you're in a dual immersion program. Probably the only place you're going to speak in Spanish is at school. So we have to really front load the Spanish instruction for those kids, or it'll never stick. But there's plenty of people in their family and their wider culture, they're not going to lose their English. But unfortunately for language minority children, even Spanish speakers in the Southland, we're a graveyard of languages. The United States can kind of beat the language out of you in about a generation and a half, sometimes even more quickly now. So for our children who show up with Spanish as their first language, part of our challenge is to keep the language alive and develop it at an age-appropriate level. You can't get by with minimal conversational skills that are appropriate for a kindergartner when you're in 6th grade. You can't read and write at only a beginning level. So our challenge with Spanish-dominant children is to make sure that all 4 domains of language are developed well in Spanish: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And understanding that some of those domains come on board a little bit later on. Writing is usually the last one that comes on board. So in a nutshell, the dual language programs have 3 pillars, and you really can't have a dual language program unless you have all 3 in place. The first pillar we're building is high levels of bilingualism in the target language and in their own language. Full communicative competence, not like a foreign language class where you learn to memorize conjugations or dialogues, but you have to really be able to use the language for reading and writing tasks, language use tasks appropriate for your age. Second pillar is access to core content, rigorous core content. You shouldn't have to wait until you're in 5th grade before you really start understanding the language in your math class. So dual language teachers do all sorts of things to scaffold instruction and make it comprehensible to children. We front load language, we use language frames, we sing and dance and do all sorts of things to make sure that the language itself is not a barrier to the content. Our program, we teach math and Spanish all the way through. We usually teach science and Spanish all the way through. Social studies can float between Spanish or English depending on the grade level. So it's full bilingual proficiency, access to the core curriculum in a rigorous core, not a watered down core. And then the third pillar, which is equally important, is sociocultural competence. It's a theoretical framework, it's a political framework, because it comes out of the fact that these programs started as civil rights programs to provide access, meaningful access to education for language minority kids. So sociocultural competence for us means we focus on the cultures of the Americas. So it's the understanding where you fit in there. We ground our work in the social justice standards. We want to make sure that kids have all the abilities to respect their own identity and cherish it, understand diversity, and the other two important domains in the social justice standards are to understand justice and to take action. So that's an important part of our program as well. And when you have all those things together, you have the model for a dual language program. And I put this little graphic up here because that's the Collier and Thomas graphic, the famous one. Longitudinal studies, lots and lots and lots of kids that show the different program outcomes. If this is the 50th percentile on a normal curve equivalent, that's your top of the bell curve. Most of the programs down here, which are things like ESL, early exit, transitional bilingual ed, content-based ESL, they don't get there, they fall short. And they start falling short at about third grade. And you know as teachers that third grade is kind of the time when it shifts from learning to read to reading to learn. And if you don't have those skills in place, you can't handle the higher conceptual challenges that the upper grades present. You'll notice that the only programs that get above the average for English speakers are one-way dual immersion and two-way dual immersion. And the two-way dual immersion programs are the ones that have approximately equal numbers of speakers of both languages. That lets kids learn from each other as well as from their teachers. It models native-like accents, and a lot of those little things are corrected right away that a teacher can't spot and correct with 24 kids in his or her classroom. So if an English speaker makes a predictable mistake like yo sabo, all right, that's an understandable mistake. That's a regular conjugation of an irregular verb. I might not hear it if I'm trying to pay attention to 24 children. But the native speaker that hears an English speaker say that will immediately go, yo sé, and it's corrected. And it doesn't fossilize as an error. So there's so many benefits in children learning from each other, with each other. Nobody is at a deficit position. Everybody's language skills are valued and are seen as a resource that helps everyone else learn better. So that's my spiel on dual immersion.
Thank you for your time.